allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Take a roll call. Mr. Gartz?
Here.
Mr. Hall? Here. Mr. Krupa?
Here.
Ms. Mangan?
Here.
Mr. Nasser?
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Here.
Ms. Stites? Mr. Wondrak? Mr. Adenizio?
Here. Thank you. Okay, we are reconvened, and we will be starting with Policy Committee.
Okay, thank you. We are not suggesting any policies for this month for first reading. The second readings we have already discussed, 3214 and 4214. So before I bring up any other policy topics, do any board members have questions or comments with regard to those two? Okay. The other policy item that I want to bring to your attention is that our current policy on grievances has language that is inconsistent with the collective bargaining agreement with the WTEA on grievances. So the WTEA has suggested revisions to that policy, which I was waiting for Mr. Adenizio to tell me who is on the policy committee. That I will be now forwarding out to those of you who are on the committee for you to take a close look, and then you can come back and recommend to the board if you're comfortable with the changes or not. I had discussed with Mr. Gross that since grievance is something that is negotiated, should there be an issue or a grievance that came before the board in this time period while you're reviewing the policy, the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, takes precedence over the policy because it's negotiated. And in the past, whenever we've had to look at a grievance and think about what our process is for addressing the concern, we've always relied on the collective bargaining agreement, not the policy. But it would be a good idea to get that language aligned. So I'll be sending that out to you, and also ensuring that the policy language not only matches what's in the WTEA collective bargaining agreement, but also what's in the WTASC collective bargaining agreement. All right, just to give you some background as to why you're going to be seeing suggestions for change there.
Yeah. Superintendent Dyer, could you give the policy number?
Yes, I can as soon as I open it up. It is 4340 for support staff and 3340 for the teaching staff. Okay, so you'll be seeing suggested revisions to both of those policies. And if you're comfortable with that, then in March we would put those policies up for first reading. Okay? You're welcome.
Chair, can I ask a question? It's not about the policies per se. It's just why is it that the same, 3214, 4214, why they seem like they're almost...
They are the same. The 4200s are for support staff, and 3300s are for teaching staff.
Thank you.
So often you see almost identical policies in those two categories.
I remember now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
A while back, I had brought up 4100, policy 4100, and I did not have any recommendations for the last few weeks, but I've been looking at it. So can we bring that up for the next workshop?
Sure, and if you send, that's the
Send it
one
to
on
you ahead of time, you
hiring.
said, right?
Right,
Yep.
that's the one on hiring of support staff. If you send me recommendations, anybody on the board, I can incorporate them into a document that I would then send out to the policy committee for you to review further, okay?
Thank you.
Anything else for policy? Nope. Okay, seeing none. Curriculum and instruction. Dr. Gleason, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Adenizio. With your permission, I'd like to lead the board through the agenda. The first item I sent as an attachment was the Wall High School new course proposals, and hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at new courses that are being proposed for the high school. Are there any questions on any of those courses?
Lisa, I just have a couple. I'm sure the policy for evaluating new courses is pretty thorough, but can you just explain where this stems from? Is it student interest? Is it faculty interest? Is it where the curriculum's going? Like, where do we come up with these ideas?
Sure. Annually, the high school administration solicits interest from students and staff. Oftentimes, that's also happening just throughout the year with student interest, and students will let the teachers know that they'd like either the next level of this course, or, you know, they had heard that we had a course in prior years that's no longer on the books. So that's sort of ongoing throughout the year. But around January, Mrs. Sergio and Mrs. Misa and the supervisors are really working to gather that input from students and from staff. So it's an annual process that they do go through, and then they send those course proposals over to the Office of Curriculum Instruction so that we can present it to the board and show you what those courses are. Some of those courses, as I said, Entrepreneurship 2, for example, that is a sort of the next step for entrepreneurship, which is a new course, and the students express an interest in moving on to the next level and really kind of understanding beyond just the starting of a new business, what's beyond that, and growing your business and the kinds of platforms that you would have to be involved in and the financial reports. So that's a typical example of a class that came as the next step from the students.
And are these classes replacing other classes? Are there any classes being eliminated? What's the budget impact of adding whatever 6 or 9 classes here?
So currently, according to the high school administration, none of these classes have budgetary impact. There's teacher power for these courses. Again, these courses are proposed, they go to the board for approval, and then they will only run if there's enough enrollment to run the course. So sometimes there will be new courses proposed, and even though it may come from the students or staff, by the time we get to enrollment, there aren't enough students enrolled in the class. So we'll see it on the books, but we might not see it actually run. But currently, we do not have any budgetary impact from any of these courses that are being proposed.
And just what is the number of minimum that we're looking for per class, or does it vary by the type of class?
I think that we've varied that by class. Of course, we like to see, minimally 10 students in a class, but because we don't have study hall and we're on block schedule, sometimes we have had classes with lesser enrollment, but we are, of course, looking to try to get at least 10 or 12 students in a class before we run it.
Thank you.
Well, and also, because during the process of enrolling and scheduling, conflicts arise. If we're trying to run a class with no fewer than 10 to 12 students, we usually don't schedule it unless we have at least 15 to 18 interested, because especially when something is running as a singleton, there are going to be conflicts. So 18 students might want it, but only 12 can actually fit it in their schedule. And if you say we're going to run it as long as 10 students are interested, chances are you'll end up with 6.
I did want to make you aware of one change. I'm sorry, Mr. Hall, did I interrupt?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Before we get into that, I was just curious. Could you just quickly, if you know the answer to this, the number of credits that you need to graduate high school is 120? Is that still?
120.
Is that still the way it is from
correct.
back as I remember? And out of that 120, what is mandated by the state that each student would have to take in their 4 years, like 60, 80? Like, is there a certain number that so many years of so many different things?
Years, exactly. So students have to have 4 years of health and phys ed. Students have to have 3 years of math by state mandate, 4 years of English. I'm trying to think. They have to have 10 credits of practical arts or the new 21st century. So that could be their art, that could be a family life program. Any of the career-focused classes could also count towards their practical arts.
Okay, I guess
1 year of world language,
1 year
so
of
5
world
credits
language.
there. So a lot of the 120 is is accounted for in terms of state requirements.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get. I'm just trying to get out of what is a normal, regular student, okay? Not a, someone right in the middle. What's the number of classes that he would have as an elective during his career at Wall High School? Is it 10 classes that he could pick? Oh, I'd like to try this entrepreneur class, or I'd like to try this one.
You can.
How many of them are
So there's
electives
that's a great question.
out of your career at 4 years?
Well, that can really depend, because a student who's taking all of their required courses, but then also taking several AP classes, certain classes that are specific to a major that they're looking to really focus on in preparing for college, may have lesser elective classes that they be picking. So that really would vary student by student. And we have students that may complete all of those requirements and be over that number, in which case you'll have students who might have a work release or an early release in their senior year because they've already met those requirements. So it'd be hard to say, but the key is that we want to make sure that we have enough electives of interest for students to be able to select from. And that's why the high school administration on an annual basis goes through looking at how many electives are running and how many are really being, you have a healthy enrollment each year. And when they're not, even though they might be approved, but we're not seeing enrollment, that's when they're really looking to the students and the teachers to look at what are some classes that might be interested. And so you'll always see some new classes that they're proposing. Sometimes these also come through program evaluation too. So the committee members who are involved in program evaluation for a certain content area, those teachers will also maybe suggest some classes or electives as well.
Can I just jump in one more time? So adding up the math quickly, it's 110 credits, 50, 70, 90, 100. 100 credits that are required. But a student over the course of 4 years has the opportunity to take in excess of 120. So the schedule allows for a couple of electives a year, some of them 2.5 credit electives, which would be for a semester, and others that might be 5 credits. And some of the requirements, like 10 credits in practical arts and fine arts, would also count as electives, right? So depending on where a student wants to focus. But in a year, and over the course of 4 years, they're able to take much more than the 120. Some of the classes at the high school, for example, are 7.5 credits, not 5. Your typical college prep English class that meets 120 hours in the year, which is your Carnegie units for accreditation, would be a 5-credit course. But an AP course that meets more for a longer period of time or more times over the course of the year could be 7 or 7.5 credits. Okay, does that help? Yeah. There's a lot of flexibility for students to be able to sort of dive into their interests.
Yeah, that's what I was getting. I was wondering, when you have to take math, you have to take English, you have to take, phys ed or whatever, at the end of the year, you're like, maybe you can get one class a year that you can take as an elective, or maybe it's 2 classes, one a semester, or I'm just trying to get a feel of what exactly the state mandates that you have to take, and then how much you have flexibility on your own to choose some of these classes, because offering all these classes might be great, but if everybody's so tied down on, what they have to take, there's not enough kids around to have fill all the electives. And so then you end up with great, you have more choices, but then you have eight, you have 8 in every class, when maybe if you got rid of 5 or 6 of them, they'd be shrunk into, you'd have 10 or 12 or 15 in a class because there's not as many. So it's about how many.
You're
do they
exactly
offer.
right, and that's what they do in as part of the scheduling process in the spring. So when there are only 8 students, then decisions need to be made about whether or not we're going to run that course. And if we don't run the course, then those 8 students have choices of other electives where there's room. That's always a difficult decision. I don't want to minimize it, because if you're looking at a course like a sequence, Latin, for example, was an issue last year. You have students in the pipeline who have been taking Latin and want to continue for 4 years and envisioned that they'd go on to AP Latin, and now you have declining enrollment. You need to make a decision about whether or not you're going to stay committed to that and continue to offer that to students. Are you going to start to eliminate a class at the beginning stages of that class, which was a recommendation that came to the board last year, that we would eliminate 6th and 7th grade Latin and allow the kids at the high school to continue. And then, eventually you're kind of phasing out a program. And we had a lot of pushback from the community who said that, no, they wanted their kids to still have the opportunity to take Latin. So it is a balancing act that we do every year, but it has a way of working itself out. When new things are offered, some of the other things kind of fall off.
The planning template that the students work with the guidance counselors each year, a typical schedule, if there's such a thing, allows for 2 electives each year. Now, again, as Mrs. Dyer said, if it's a half-year course or 2.5 credit course, it could be more, but 2 full 5-credit electives to balance. Sure.
Could I jump in as well? So I think that speaks to a different but related topic in terms of designing, I'm going to use the word tracks or academies and that kind of thing, because guidance is a critical issue here for kids. They're the ones that go in and meet with the counselors. As experienced high school parent here, I talk to my son, but eventually it's between him and the counselor. So the more, information or guidance we can give them, and I don't mean guidance, I mean in terms of how you can be creative, because there are those electives that also suffice, as you mentioned, Ms. Dyer, the core requirements. And that's where we're getting the bigger bang for the buck for these kids and for the community, I believe. And to another comment that was made, I think it might be beneficial for us at some point to do, we have, I would hope, a high school guidance booklet that tells you all the courses in all the departments. Sometimes what happens is it just keeps going, and it's just a process that's done annually. But to Russell's point, if we could see what drops off, and that's actually a document that we see as a board, I think we can be more comfortable with the fact that there is this constant review. Not that there isn't, but it's documented. And then you're taking these courses out that are no longer run for whatever reason. Maybe they're not a requirement anymore. Maybe there's not the interest, or maybe there's not the budget for it.
Sure, we can do that. The program of studies is on the website, and we can send it out to the board. It's usually approved in April as part of the mini reorganization that's done. And we can certainly highlight over the years what has been removed from the program of studies.
Any other questions on new course proposals? The next agenda item is just an update. On March 4th, we will be having a parent university. It will be a parent university that's appropriate for all parents from pre-K through 12, and it will be led by Alicia DiLorenzo. Alicia DiLorenzo is the owner of Living Yes, and she's a licensed counselor. The topic is going to be social-emotional support and mindfulness. And we met Alicia DiLorenzo. She's now leading or keynoting the Monmouth County Wellness Symposium. And we had last fall attended at Brookdale a really large event attended by mostly parents and school administrators, really looking for information on how to support their child in sort of the age that we're living in now with social media, bullying, and a lot of the other things that are, in their contemporary lives right now. And she does a really, really nice job of speaking to all different parents of different age spans. She'll also be keynoting the next Wellness Symposium, which will be attended by Monmouth County educators and parents as well later this spring. We're also going to be inviting other districts to attend. If parents would like to attend. I think that this is the kind of thing that we like to share, the information that's out there, because it's a topic that's common and of interest to parents of children of all ages. So that'll be on March 4th. I will have the little abstract blurb from Mrs. DiLorenzo probably by the end of this week, and then I will be sending that out via Blackboard Connect through the community, and I'll be happy to share that proposal, the abstract as well, with Mrs. Dyer, and she can include that with notes for the board.
Can you just tell us where that's being held and at what time?
Yes, it's going to be March 4th, and it will be 6:30, and it will be in the high school auditorium. And we're hoping to really advertise that. I think the topic is really important. During some of our recent parent universities, the most recent being the 5th grade parents, we had the introduction of the Lifeline Suicide Awareness Curriculum. And although it wasn't a lot of parents that attended, what they told us during that presentation is we need more of this. And then if you go back to last June, I believe, when we did the Screenagers, the documentary, and we had the Wall Township Police Department and the Detective of Internet Crimes, we did that parent university. Parents followed that with, we need more of this. We need to know how to help our children in this, age that they are living in, and the kinds of challenges, and how do we know as parents that we're getting it right with all of this social media. So we've been hearing from parents that this is the kind of thing that they want, and the last CTAC survey that we did in the summary report, that was another piece that came back in the survey, that parents are looking for more parent support through these universities.
Lisa, in terms of this date and time, obviously not everybody's going to be able to make it, but I would agree it's a topical issue that everybody can benefit from. How do we integrate that topic and cascade it through PTOs, high school, middle school, so on and so forth, so a broader group of people can get it, but maybe not, can't make that night? Is there a way that she recommends that we can do that?
Well, I had my first planning call with her this past week, and I have another one coming up, and that's a great point. So maybe we can work with her to really look at more of a sustainable plan, as you say, that cascades through different stakeholder groups, because it's a high-interest topic. And so I will definitely ask her for that kind of guidance, so we can make sure it gets to as many people as possible. And hopefully, with a lot of publicity and marketing, we can get the information out to parents.
Could I just, along with what Russell's
Sure.
suggesting, we're fortunate, I guess, in that in Neptune, Hackensack Meridian just opened up the first of its kind in the area mental health complex. It's large. It's on the corner by the Snow King or whatever. But anyway, that's a very unusual service to have. And it's a national area of shortage. Maybe they can be apprised of this offering as well, because we don't know what percentage of our population is taking advantage of that service or is.
And so maybe I can get that information from you, Andy, so we can look at that. It's always, these parent universities are always a great opportunity to see if we can partner multiple presenters, of similar topics. So certainly if there's a complementary speaker or complementary service that we can provide information, we can do that.
Can you ask if it can be streamed?
Great idea. Sure. It's a great idea.
If we were going to do it, you probably need to move it here then, correct?
We could do that, because we haven't sent anything out yet to parents. So if we want to change the venue. Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you, great suggestions. As promised, I spoke with Mr. Lee, our Director of Technology. I have an update on the observatory. It was a very positive update. The observatory was dismantled and sent back to Celestron, which is the primary provider of the telescope and the mounts. There were some other, like, ancillary vendors that provided some other pieces, but Celestron was the main vendor. So it was sent back to them. The repairs for the mount and the motor amounted to $313.32, which we were really pleased with. And the telescope and observatory has been returned back to us, and we are now waiting for the quote on the software. We're also working very closely with Brookdale Star Astronomy Group as well as InfoAge on making sure that this is the kind of software that we can partner with both InfoAge and STAR, so that we can do, as we talked about last month, really use the strengths of each of those organizations when we have a solar or lunar eclipse. And they would have potentially the ability to access the telescope and partner their telescopes with ours, as well as come on site and be able to get people over to our observatory and bring some of theirs when we have a major event. So we're still on track, according to Mr. Lee, to have the observatory up and running by the spring. I'm thinking April or May at the latest. And so things are looking good there. I did do some research with the Astronomy Club, because we still have that $700. That was the remaining balance from the foundation that provided the funds for the observatory. And the foundation member had requested those funds be used for professional development or in some way to help support someone to be using the observatory. So we had an astronomy club. It's still one of our listed stipends in the CBA, but the club did not run this year due to low enrollment. So I reached out to Ms. Scott, our club advisor at the high school, and she's going to be working also with Mrs. Kerman to see if we can regenerate interest in getting the astronomy club going, knowing that we have the telescope and the observatory up and running, and talk to the former advisor to see if he would be interested. So we're moving that forward. Any questions on the observatory?
Just a question on that club. So since the club has been inactive, would it come back as a volunteer position and then grow from there, or would it, excuse me, or would it come back as a full club again?
I believe that our policy would allow that club to just immediately begin again, because it already ran under volunteer and was a full club, but it did not meet the enrollment numbers to run again. So I think we can just reestablish that club as is.
Okay. And what are the enrollment numbers for a club like that? Do you know?
The last attendance, I believe they only had about 5 or 6 students in that club, according to Mrs. Scott.
Okay.
But again, I think when you have something that might be really of high interest for them, rather than seeking out opportunities, there's something for them to really get, to sink their teeth into, and it's on site here, I think we might be able to really get them remotivated again. So we're going to work on doing that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Are there any teachers that are passionate about the rebirth of this tool?
I would hope so. I don't know that right now, but I would hope so, and until we really know the timeline. But I think it is time to start. As I said, Ms. Scott will be talking to the former Astronomy Club advisor, but I do think it's time to also talk to our teachers and see who is involved. Because as we've said, this is not something that will be solely relegated to just the club. This is a resource that we want to use throughout the curriculum from elementary all the way up to high school. But I do think it will be important to have a dedicated teacher and club that really, that's their baby, and they're really, working on that and using that as a resource. So we'll hopefully have that with the Astronomy Club. Any other questions on the observatory?
Level is the club at again? It's high school?
It's
or-
high school,
Okay.
correct. Okay, I provided the board a copy of the Teacher Leadership Council application. I wanted you to be able to take a look at this. I had discussed this about 2 months ago at one of the workshop meetings. We're really excited about this Teacher Leadership Council. The purpose of the Teacher Leadership Council is to really look at the talent that we have in our teaching staff and begin to develop these pathways for teachers to build their leadership capacity, and not just with professional development, which is what often our teachers do. We have lots of teacher leaders already. But we've used the National Model Teacher Leader Standards, and there are 7 standards that teachers can show really an area of expertise. It could be their content area, it could be professional development, but it could also be that they are interested in public policy and advocating for the field of education. They could be very interested in community engagement, and that's a strength of theirs. So there's 7 different domains, which you'll see spelled out in the application. And again, those come from the National Teacher Leader Standards. We had a meeting last week, and we had about 10 or 12 teachers come to the meeting that are interested and are applying. And we had an additional 3 teachers that emailed me that are also interested. You are not required to attend the meeting if you're interested. We're looking to hopefully have it about 10 this year, and then we'll grow that council as the years go by. The reason that we have 10 is because there is a funding source for this, and the funding source is through Title II, which is part of our federal ESSA fund. And so one of the allowable uses of that fund is for teacher recruitment, teacher induction, and teacher retention. So how are we really, gaining the best teachers, grooming our teachers, and grooming them to stay here in Wall Township? And I think that providing this, enhanced professional development and really showcasing what they do best and empowering them with leadership skills is a great way for teachers to really feel, as I said, empowered in their positions and in the field of education. So I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. We have a really nice steering committee that's made up of administrators. The union provided us teachers that they wanted to sit on the committee as well. So we have stakeholders from both administrators and the teaching staff. And we've met, and we've already gone on professional development on teacher leadership. So they're really invested in the process. The applications are due by February 21st, and then the steering committee will get together and we'll review those applications and hopefully put together our first teacher leadership council. Any questions on that item?
The money that you referenced, say that again, it's money that has to be used for that, or it's just one of the options for the
That's
money?
one of the options. Title II is for professional development and teacher recruitment, induction, and retention. So there are 2 allowable uses for Title II funds.
And so what would that money be used for in relationship to this council?
So
Is there a budget or something?
Yeah, there's a budget for that, and the title budget was approved, I believe, back in August, but I can share that again so you can see how that breaks down. But basically, there's 3 prongs to that budget item. So the first would be to pay for those teachers to attend leadership training. We're hoping to have 3 leadership workshops. The first term will be for 18 months because we're coming at this late in the year. So these teacher leaders that will be accepted into the first cohort will actually serve through this June and then through June of 2021. So they'll attend 3 leadership training, and they'll be paid to attend those. Those will be outside of their school hours. They also will be provided additional professional development opportunities. We ask them to seek those out on their own, and we also help them find some of those that are specific to the domains that they feel that are their strengths. And then the third piece of that funding source would go to paying teachers to provide professional development after school, before school, during in-service days, and that would be at their hourly contracted rate in the CBA. So there is a funding source, and when we, sort of costed that out, we figured we could do about 10 teachers in the first cohort with the money that's in there.
And none of that's done currently? None of that teaching, getting paid to teach other teachers, or any of that's done currently?
We do that. We've always offered, it's in the CBA, where teachers can do professional development, and they're paid at their hourly rate. It's usually specific to their content area, or if they're particularly skillful in instructional technology, something that's usually, in their wheelhouse. The Teacher Leadership Council really expands above and beyond just that, and as I mentioned, it goes into the areas of how can they help participate with community engagement, parent involvement, advocacy, as well as professional development. They could be coaching other teachers. They could be mentoring other teachers. So we do that currently where there's a need, but this is really about growing that larger than just professional development, here and there.
The other model that you were just referencing, that could be like an after-school district course that teachers take. Sometimes some districts will give them credit, some on the guide. It's a whole hodgepodge of ways that could look like in a district. But what's been a trend for a little while now is another piece, which I don't think you said, which is we're developing our own talents, not only for being better teachers pedagogically and in their content and all of that, and just encouraging, growth and excitement about teaching, but also, and this is key, is administrative promise for us within our own ranks. And, that's one of the things that people often in this field will complain about, that they weren't hired from within or something like that, or given opportunity to grow. And, you don't want to lose them, but some do go out to other districts for whatever reason. But that is a key component. You did answer one of the questions that I had with regards to who was involved in helping you to make this proposal. Another question I had, we referenced the national standards related to this, but could you unpack a little bit how they might also have been related to New Jersey standards?
So one of the new endorsements through the Department of Education is a new teacher leader endorsement. And there's not a lot known about it. They're in their first year. We actually had one of our teachers in Allenwood School apply and be accepted into the program. So I believe that the idea is there will actually be an endorsement that gives sort of credential above and beyond what your teaching credential does. And there's the entire program is based upon these same teacher leader model standards. And in fact, the teacher who was accepted into the New Jersey program is also was involved in both our steering committee and will obviously be applying and likely accepted into our Teacher Leadership Council. So she was really impressed with the way ours dovetailed so nicely with what the state is doing, and that's because we're using the same set of standards. And I agree with you, Andy, that it's both empowering teachers and getting them excited and giving them more ownership and agency in their own career and profession, and it also does groom those teachers that are looking to move into administration, and they're groomed in the ways that we say this is what's important in Wall Township, which might be different than another district that an outside candidate would come. But we did make it clear at the meeting that if a teacher is interested in this, the expectation is not that they are going into administration, right? Because we also want to, right. But we also want to have great teachers and great teacher leaders in the teaching ranks too. So some of the teachers said, does this mean we have to go into administration? We said, no, you don't have to go into administration. But it could be a great pathway if you're interested, but we're not pushing them in that direction. It's a skill set, for sure.
I just want to clarify one thing, because it previously was true that school districts could offer credit for advancement on the guide through their own professional development. That is no longer true. That was a change in the accountability regs back in, I think, 2011, that now the only movement on the guide has to be related to credits from a accredited university. Yeah.
Question I had that developed from your presentation tonight is on number 5, if you are selected for the second phase, please be prepared to provide a brief presentation on the selected domains. Will that be fleshed out more, because that can be intimidating without, you know.
And we did
I mean,
talk-
AI teachers, they know how to do that, but.
So we did talk to the teachers that attended the meeting. So they'll submit their first application, the first phase of the application, and we've told them to really, rather than cover all of the domains and the ways in which your practice supports all those domains, select one maybe 2 that is really your area of, that you're passionate about and really your area of expertise. And then as we, the committee, go through who we're moving into this second phase, we'll tell them, like, we want you to pick domain 2 and develop a 15-minute presentation based upon what they're writing in that application, either evidence of what you've done already or your concept for how you will use your strengths to benefit the school community, teachers, the extended school community, and it'll be a very brief presentation. And we will have a rubric that we will give to them before that presentation, and that'll happen in March.
I'd like to thank Andy for his Board of Education Leadership Council pedagogically, is that what that was? Pedagogical? Man,
Google it, Chris.
great vocabulary lesson. Just 2 quick questions. Number 1, I know you mentioned the number 10. Is that, I mean, is there like
It's a soft
a
number.
bookmark? Okay, so that's the first question. Second question is there any thought to having, how am I going to say this, teachers represented from certainly each school so that they can work, amongst each other, and then be able to have that kind of spider web within the district? I know we try to, when we have different teachers and different things like that, everybody kind of works within their own confines. But, we try to, have everything be sort of uniform throughout the elementary schools to some degree. I was just wondering if there's any thought given to that.
I think that this is an opportunity to expand outside of school-based professional development, meaning that if we have someone who is really skilled in a particular, let's just go back to the instructional technology or a content area, that they're not just working with their school, but the idea is that they can get to the other schools and maybe outside of their own grade span. I'll give you an example of that. We had the science program evaluation for grades K-5 last year, and we happened to have a high school teacher, phenomenal teacher, who voluntarily wanted to get involved in the program evaluation so that he could really support middle school and the elementary school teachers in understanding, like, how do we get up to that high school level of knowledge down in the elementary level, and also how do we make the shift to these new standards that came in the last couple of years that were more rigorous than the prior standards. And the elementary teachers just raved about their time having him there. He also worked with them, some of it voluntary during the summer, in rewriting the curriculum with science. And they really had the support of a high school content specialist. So to your point, I think, yes, this is going to grow and morph and change, but I think that the idea is we want to use our experts in all areas of the school, and depending upon what their, professed expertise is, it could be something that we really want to share globally within the district. But there's definitely the idea that it's equity across all schools, and if it's something that's specific to elementary, we want to make sure that that person is accessing all of the elementary schools, and all of the teachers get the benefit of that teacher leader. So it'll, I think, really change over time as we see who do we have and what are their strengths. You're welcome.
Lisa, who's on the committee to select the teachers?
To select the teachers, the steering committee is made up of administrators at all grade levels, or all grade spans, I should say. We have high school, we have intermediate school, principals and supervisors, and then we also have teachers from each of the schools, each of the grade spans, I should say. And
Do you have
those
names
were,
that you can share? Of who's on the committee?
yeah, I don't know, I can share those names, correct?
How many people are there?
I believe
you
we
don't have
have
to share the
12
names
or
now, but-
13. We definitely have, and the union provided us, we did invite the union to select who they would like on the
That's fine.
committee.
And how do you plan to report back to the board to validate the need for this council at some point in the future?
Well, I think that.
What's
that-
the impact that we're going to hear about?
I think that once we see who comes forward, what their expertise is, and we see the attendance at professional development workshops, I think that's where we're really going to see the impact. The main thrust of teacher leadership is impacting and influencing your colleagues.
Right.
And so with another trusted, influential colleague. So I think that the first metric we would use to measure the success of that is to look at who's attending and surveys from those who are attending to say, like, how did this help me with my practice? And then ultimately, how does that practice impact students? But this is about improving instruction at its heart, and then also, as I said, some of the other domains, impact other areas of education. But I think at the heart of it is teachers helping teachers.
And is there a supervisor of the council or somebody that's getting paid to run this council?
No,
Well,
So I'm
the
just
council is under your
confused.
direction,
it's under my
right?
direction,
So I'm
correct.
just confused, the need for the council versus if we're doing this already, like, I don't know where the difference is, quite honestly.
So we do not have an organized or set of standards. So we might have someone who, a supervisor, administrator says, we have an in-service coming up and this person has done a great job with this particular piece of something,
right.
topic. Could we pay that person to present for an hour at an after-school faculty meeting? So, and it works, and we certainly have that. What we're trying to do is really use a set of standards to move beyond just professional development, as I said, and to grow teachers in larger ways than just what is their instructional expertise. So it is working what we have now. I think we can grow it bigger than that, and I think that teachers deserve that kind of recognition. I think teachers, a lot of times, do a lot of this even behind the scenes in helping each other in their PLCs, their professional learning communities. I think that compensating teachers to do this, it also validates how hard they work. And so I think that there will be a lot of interest based upon that the recognition is there.
Did we model this off of other districts that have something?
Teacher leadership councils and these cadres are this is not new to Wall Township, for sure. And I think that's why the Department of Ed is really moving into this teacher leadership endorsement. I think more and more they've been used as a pathway to administration.
Right.
But I don't think it has to be the only function of the council. So at its heart, again, we're trying to really recognize and grow our teaching staff within their own expertise. But
Dr.
it's not
Gleason,
new.
as part of the feedback loop, in terms of reporting out to the board on the success and, any need for change in the program, wouldn't that also be part of your annual professional development plan that would be generated and approved and, part of the whole process that is the cycle of PD and curriculum and instruction?
The teacher leadership, yes, the Teacher Leadership Council is in our current professional development plan, which the board that was in place at that time had looked at last summer. We usually approve that during the summertime. So that was actually one of the goals in the professional development plan. So yes, we have to review it as part of the plan. And again, the metrics of that would be looking at how many teachers we have involved and the impact on teachers through surveys and their feedback.
I have a question. So first-year teachers, would their mentor be part of the Teacher Leadership Council?
It could be, but doesn't have to be. So first-year teachers are required to have a mentor, and they're in the provisional program for 2 years. So our mentor plan is state mandated, and it provides that teachers who are tenured, experienced, they have the recommendation of their principal, are eligible to become a mentor. That does not necessarily mean that they're in the Teacher Leadership Council, because remember, the Teacher Leadership Council requires them to go above and beyond that. So they're paid as mentors. There is compensation for that. We're required to do that. But the Teacher Leadership Council would also ask those teacher leaders to be going for additional professional development, to attend at least 3 leadership workshops a year, and then also to provide professional development for larger groups of people. So I anticipate, in looking at the teachers who attended the meeting, there are several in there that have been mentors. Okay. So I think it's going to dovetail, but I don't think that they're not necessarily going to be in Teacher Leadership Council if they are a mentor, if that makes sense.
And I think it's important to recognize that teachers are required to submit at least 20 hours of professional development a year. So having a vast array of different opportunities available for maybe some of the seasoned teachers is a great opportunity for them to advance their profession.
That's a really important point, and each spring, I send a survey out to the teachers and also the administrators. It's a professional development needs survey, and it lists sort of all of the items that impact their practice, and it asks them to tell us where they feel they need more professional development. It also asks what is the most impactful professional development, and it's a drop down, and it says, in district, out of district, selected by your administrator, or self-selected. And each year, it always comes back. The number one is in district. They want to have professional development by people they know, because a lot of times people from the outside don't understand the culture of the school. They don't understand what's happening in terms of instruction, so it's kind of a quick drive-by PD, where if it's someone from the inside, not only do you already understand and know your teachers, you're also a go-to for them later when they have questions. So we've seen that need, which is really the impetus for why that goal found its way into the professional development plan for a teacher leadership training.
I completely agree. As a teacher myself, I definitely have ran, professional development in my school, and working with my own colleagues is definitely more beneficial than, maybe going to see an outside seminar, because then you can utilize each other, turnkey, and then collaborate, and then you're working ongoing. So I definitely agree that there's a need for it.
Great. So I will keep the board apprised of the progress as we go along, the final numbers, and then you can expect to have more data as we move into the actual training and the teacher leaders developing their workshops for other teachers.
Can I ask one more question? This kind of builds back off of the feedback loop portion that Cheryl had mentioned. Yesterday, when we were listening to Mike and Frank when they came in, they're going through the survey results, and one of the things that they brought up was the concept of institutional fatigue. Some of the feedback from different stakeholders is there, and this program sounds like something that can help to alleviate it in the long run. Is this something that we can use, and I bring back the feedback loop, in getting feedback from the bottom up, at least to, these next few months are going to be stressful for everybody. You've done a great job in building momentum and getting things moving forward. How do we use this to push through this phase to the next leader and the next set of priorities without continuing to burn out our staff? And I'm not saying they're getting burned out, but I mean, it can be stressful, not just for them, but the students and even the parents at home.
Well, you bring up a really good point, and I did watch the presentation, and I did see, the presentation that talked about this, institutional fatigue, which can happen when there's been turnover in leadership, and each administration brings with it initiatives. Our initiatives have all been grounded in the strategic plan. So the academies, all of those kinds of initiatives that we've moved forward with, again, we're grounded in the strategic plan. With that being said, to your point, they do require teacher buy-in, and sometimes it's just mental buy-in, right? It might not look like it impacts a teacher, but it feels like there's a lot going on, and that can contribute to that idea of institutional fatigue. So with regard to the Teacher Leadership Council, yeah, I think that could be an opportunity, because it's voluntary. So it's only impacting those teachers that want to be impacted and see it as a sort of a wellspring to make them better, to renew their passion for teaching and the area of teaching that they really love. So I think that can be an area. If you look at the domains of that Teacher Leadership Council, one addresses culture and climate. And I think that's an area that we're really needing to address here in the district, and looking at the survey results, that's an area that we do need to look at. So this might be a really nice way to dovetail, as you say, from the ground up, the teachers who are boots on the ground, who has that kind of influence to help raise morale, help take some of that pressure off of teachers, help teachers through some of these tough times of transition. So I think that that's a great point, and I think we should really look at that when we have the applicants move forward to see who could be influential in that particular area. You're welcome, thank you.
Lisa, to that point, I guess, I didn't get this, I mean, maybe I missed it, so if you could follow up at some point with an email about the clear impact of what this is gonna have and what we expect from these teachers, and I know it varies based on their level and where they're at, but is this something imperative that we have to do now, or can we wait till the superintendent is here and that new superintendent has some impact on where this group goes?
Sure, absolutely. I think, you know, in any of the new initiatives, there's a way to strike a balance because we are in a transitional time. I want to make sure that we are not dampening the enthusiasm of those teacher applicants that are excited about this, because we have a lot of teachers that are excited about this. But I think that it wouldn't be, I think it would be appropriate in the time that we're in to say that we're moving our timelines forward a little bit and that we are.
Just to stretch it even a little bit.
I don't think that would be.
That's just my opinion. I'm not saying everybody.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, one final update. I wanted to make the board aware. Last night, I brought a small group over to Millstone Board of Education. We were approached by Dr. Huss, the superintendent of Millstone School District, and it's a K-8 district, if you're not familiar with Millstone. And he had contacted us. He had heard about the Service and Leadership Academy, and it's getting more and more publicity. And I think especially because most recently with some of our students and the scholarships they're receiving, there's just, it's really getting some notice. And so I'm sure the board's aware we currently have 2 students from Brielle that would have attended Manasquan School District that are in the Service and Leadership Academy. The board also certified tuition last year for out-of-district students, tuition-in students for the Service and Leadership Academy. So they have 1 or 2 students who are interested in the Service and Leadership Academy. So we went last night to the Board of Education, Dr. Skinner, who, excuse me, who supervises the Service and Leadership Academy, Mr. Harrison, who's the advisor and also one of the teachers, and then we had 2 cadets also come, which was great on this rainy night. They came out last night at 7:30, and we did a whole presentation to the board, and they were very, very impressed. And so we may anticipate having some interest in a couple of tuition-in students from Millstone. So as I hear from them, I'm sure they'll be contacting our administration if that's going to be moving forward. And questions?
Can I ask a question about something academic that's not on the agenda? Just because I read an article about it. Where have we been as a district, and Ms. Dyer, maybe you can answer, starting times for high school and middle school being so early? Has that ever been reviewed in this district? I know it's a hot topic, but I know it's also very difficult to do.
No one has ever asked, so let's leave it at that. That has not been a topic that has come from the parents here. It's always, there is a interest at the state level in having some districts pilot later start times for high school students in particular. It's something that we have talked about, on an administrative level. What would that look like? How would it impact busing? Like, should there be an interest from the community? There's a huge impact always with regard to athletics and after-school activities, and whether or not you would be able to still run, the bus fleet that we have that accommodates 3 different start times now. Would they be able to accommodate different start times at the elementary level? And would we want our elementary students to start earlier, because that would have to happen in order for the high school? So I think that that is one that you definitely wait for your new superintendent, and you discuss it at that time.
I think we should also keep an eye on the pilot districts. They've announced the pilot districts that are going to be piloting those later start times and see what success they have and then what challenges they have, and then see if that's something, you know, that we want to explore. So I'm glad someone's piloting.
Russ, that means our meetings have to start at 9.
We're here for 24 hours a day anyway, so.
Are there any other questions on any of the agenda items? Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
All right. Finance and Facilities, Mr. Smythe. What do you think the big difference is? Because that's a pretty big swing. Have they changed anything internally that different food products, different anything, or is it just?
Well, it's been over the last couple of years a review of how it's being presented. Also, there's some attrition with regard to, we have retirements with staff that were in different positions, and so the cost of health benefits has gone down. And the students have come back and they're purchasing lunch because, the sales are there.
Brian, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ken.
We have people that can't buy lunch. This seems to be a hot topic.
Yeah.
Because Middletown, I think they paid $43,000 to pay off accounts. Do we have stuff like that going on? Students in arrears? Yes. We're pretty diligent in following up. Sandy Bailoni Food Service sends emails, makes phone calls, where we have significant balances or extended periods of time. I receive the list, I send letters out from my office, but we do have some offenders, but we're nowhere near those type of dollars. So if we were to look at our total balance of students in arrears, it's under probably $2,500. So, I would estimate that we're less than $2,500 with students in arrears.
Brian, does the revenue include the pizza from the pizza place across the street from the high school? Or is that a separate line item of revenue? The after school, I know that they're allowed to buy.
Oh, no, that would be included. If we purchase it and sell it,
Right.
Yeah, that's included in our
Is
sales.
that new this year, or have we always been doing it?
It was new last year.
Okay, so
And that's been,
it's a hot item. That's what I
Yes.
mean. I know I lose about $50 a month doing it.
Also, more grilled cheese and tomato soup. Big one.
well, and they are looking at, backing off some of the requirements on the standards and what's permissible to be sold. So we're going to see how that pans out over the course of the next year. Because that had an impact on sales over the years. So if they start eliminating some of those restrictions and allowing additional foods, we'll have to review what those products are. Because as it is now, the food products that we're providing are nutritionally sound and the students like them, so it's working. Okay. Facility use applications, we don't have any tonight on the agenda that require board approval. I didn't know if there was any questions with regards to facility use applications in general. Okay, nope. OPA requests, we're up 16 from this time last month, or the last time we reported at the board meeting. We've had 84 requests for the school year, 78 of which we've provided responses, so we have 6 that are pending. In providing responses to the 78, we've spent 250 hours by district employees for a cost of $16,213 is the estimate. So, and that's for district employees.
Could you repeat that number?
250 hours.
I know. How much did you say it cost? I couldn't hear what you said.
16,000, little over $16,000. Any questions with regard to Open Public Records Act? Okay. State contract vendors, that's an attachment. It'll be on the agenda for next week. We'll seek approval of these vendors as state contract vendors. The updates are renewal of their state contract numbers, which had expired, so they were issued a new duration, so we've updated them in bold. Okay?
I have a question.
Can you talk in the microphone, please?
The purchase order one of the purchase orders that came up on the audit report, the asphalt one, that wasn't approved, first of all, thank you. Did we close that, and are we gonna reissue? Because I know, it came up that we hadn't approved it. I'm assuming it's either a hangover from last year, or it's still open since it was a not to exceed.
We've not taken any action on the purchase order. Stavola, as a state contract vendor, was approved in August. But we haven't taken action with regard to the purchase order.
Okay.
That's the question, not as a state contract vendor.
Are we going to?
Yeah.
Okay, is that gonna be on the agenda for
No, that'll be for next month.
next month?
Because
Okay.
we're looking to review any purchase order that may fall into that category with regard to the recommendation from the audit. So we're reviewing all purchase orders that may fall into that. The other thing we're discussing, we've always just approved state contract vendors as we've used them. One of the difficulties with that is you may have a state contract vendor who provides a quote, and a bid really wouldn't apply, but a quote, or even if it was open market, but we should then be delaying the actual issuance of a purchase order or having the work done, or the purchase, until such time as the board approves them as a state contract vendor. What a lot of districts do to avoid that delay is they approve all vendors that are listed on the state contract. I don't know if there's a feeling one way or the other in the district, because that was also, we approved Stavola subsequent to actually issuing the purchase order, doing the work, because it was the next board meeting that came up in August where they were approved as the state contract vendor. Because we review our state contract vendors and periodically update the state contract vendors list, because our previous discussion was we should only be approving those that we're actually using. But again, that's an operational issue that we have to deal with, whether we are okay with approving them subsequent to the actual issuance of a purchase order, or going down the path of approving all vendors listed under state contracts.
If we approve all vendors that are listed under state contracts, it's still gonna have to be a continuous process, right? Because they don't get just listed once a year, right? It's an ongoing list, correct?
Different contracts have different durations, so if their state contract number changes or gets updated, they would have to be renewed. So the renewal of state contract vendors would be on
Right.
an ongoing basis. But by approving all of them, you don't have to specifically wait for one particular one that you haven't previously approved.
Right. And so for my 2 cents, for whatever it's worth, I wouldn't recommend that we look at subsequently doing it after the purchase order's been approved. So whatever the best practice to get it done ahead of time or to wait for the purchase order is what I think we should do. That's my opinion.
In my practice, that is an easier way to operate, especially when, if you have an emergency, you can make something happen legally very quickly. But outside of the state contracts, you also have co-op vendors, EdData, probably ESCNJ, and whatever other ones that are out there, that if you issue a blanket, if it went over the bid threshold, of 40,000. We would still have to, as a board, approve it. If that is, if we want an additional layer of protection, you can put another benchmark number somewhere in our policy saying that, you know, all contracts over 10 or 15,000 have to be approved by the board. So there's legally, it doesn't have to be until after 40,000. As Brian mentioned, we can approve them all at once. That's the easiest way to do it.
Right.
It makes life a whole lot easier for everyone.
I'm fine with that, as long as it's, as
You're
long as
still
we're not doing
required
it.
to do the resolution over 40,000.
Yes,
It
Right,
doesn't
no,
change
no,
that
I understand that. I just don't wanna approve a PO and then hope they get approved as a state contract vendor after the fact. That's what you said, right?
No, no.
Subsequent-
Well, it's not as a state contract vendor, by the board approving
Yeah,
them,
I'd
their use
rather-
as a state contract vendor.
Do we all
Understood.
understand how this works as a whole? Where the state will, what they do is they bid out per unit pricing as volume, and it's not something that you use for everything. It's something that you're gonna use for, like asphalt, it's a good example. We don't buy enough asphalt to really be competitive and get a competitive
It
price.
helps us get a better price.
Exactly.
Right.
So, you know, these are things that if we're going through and we're doing comparative projects, say we want to do something large, you know, you have different options of making it happen. Also, honestly, in my experience, the most valuable time to have this is during the summer, when you have to make things happen fast, because if for some reason we have an unforeseen circumstance and you have to get open, you can act right then. So you know, it's got its pros and its cons, but honestly, I'm all for it.
Well, help me
Approving the
with
list of
this.
state contract vendors.
Absolutely.
Help me with this.
Yes.
They get on the list. We're just approving
The use of them.
the use of them.
Yeah, we piggyback off of theirs.
Right. So when would we do that, Brian, if we chose to do it in a lump sum kind of vote?
Next week?
It would be next week.
Because the change would be rather
So
than
it'd be a
approving
bigger
this
list, it'd
list,
be a bigger list than this?
yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any
No,
feedback about that?
I'm fine with that, because, you know, over the last several years, we've been doing it just in groups of contractors that we use or you know, off these lists. So, as Adam said, I think having a bigger pool of people in case something comes up is better for us.
And a discussion around a $20,000 threshold perhaps, or whatever level we want to get to, is something that we can talk about further down the road as well.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe pulling the policy and taking a look at it. And go from there.
Okay, item number 5 is a review of the health benefit program. This will, you know, it's a large item for the purposes of the budget, so I thought I'd give some review. You know, where we were in the 18-19 school year, where we currently are in 19-20. You know, provide you the information, the detail in which we generate the budget, or this is the level of detail we include in preparing the budget for our health benefit line. In reviewing 18-19, you know, we provide, you know, approximately 26 lines of entries on how we break down our budget. You know, from the A4 tax to the actual claims, you know, to our third-party administrator. We even break down the cost for the administration of our flexible spending account. But for the 18-19 school year, you know, we had a budget of over $9 million. It was $9,591,000. And at the year end, we probably calculated out it's going to be 99% to what was budgeted. We had a balance remaining of $22,000, $22,640. So it demonstrated that it was an accurate budget, that, you know, there was no transfers in or transfers out with regard to the health benefits. But, you know, that was a successful year, accurate year with regard to budgeting. You know, when we look at, you know, year to date currently, you know, our biggest line item are the actual claims we pay. You know, we are through December with that. And based on our actual claims for the year compared to our projection for the first 6 months, we're I think it's about $472,000, at least with that line item, that we are in the black with regard to claims. So, you know, we anticipate seeing a balance remaining in this account as long as the second half of the year, you know, trends the same as the first half. You know, granted, this time last year, when we just look at claims, based on our budget, we were $135,000 in the red with claims when you move through December. But then the second half of the year, we ended up, compared to our budget for the second half of the year, we were, you know, our actual claims were $25,000 less than what we budgeted. There are other figures that, you know, would need to be factored in to be completely accurate. Certain things that we don't budget because we don't know the number, but it impacts the actual claims. Like if somebody's on a leave of absence, their contribution, or somebody has a dependent 31 and they're going to keep that child on the plan, they pay that cost. So that goes toward as a refund to this account, which is actually offsetting the claims that may be paid on their behalf. So, you know, one of the concerns or things that we need to consider when looking where we stand at any point, you know, during the year is we pay the actual claims. So this month our claims could be $800,000. Next month they could be $900,000. The following month they may be $750,000. So that fluctuates. So we try to be somewhat conservative on our projections through the year, but at where it stands now, when we just look at that line item, we're a little less than $500,000 in the black. Everything else should trend, you know, pretty much what they are, because a lot of them are almost fixed costs. So, but I didn't know if there was any questions, because we're going to start in earnest looking at our renewal for next year. We've already discussed with the broker, asking for the projections. Because we're trending so well for the first 6 months, we are hopeful that we're going to look, and we're pushing them with their recommendation that we shouldn't see the type of increase that we saw last year. Last year, the projection that came out from a budget line item, we had about a 10% increase in our health benefits, and that was based on the recommendation of the broker, based on how we were trending and what our claims experience was. But you know, as it stands this year, our claims experience is much better, so we hope to transcend that into what our actual budget numbers will be, which ultimately calculates what our premium, we refer to it as a premium equivalent. Like if we had a private plan or if we were in a state plan, we'd pay a premium. We don't pay a premium. But what we do calculate is a premium equivalent, so that contributions by employees can be calculated based on that premium equivalent. And we look to maintain being below the state health benefits on a annual basis with regard to the premium equivalent, because we've always been below the cost for our total health benefit line as compared to the state health benefits. You know, it's getting a little more difficult now with regard to the comparison, because the plans aren't necessarily apples to apples anymore. When we came out of the state, ours mirrored the state health benefit plans, but there's been changes in the state plan over the years. Ours has remained relatively consistent, other than how changes have been included in negotiations. And annually we review being in the state plan as well as a comparison. The only thing we need to remember, though, is based on our collective bargaining agreement, we have an equal or better clause. We can't just arbitrarily say, hey, we're going in the state health benefit. But we do use it as a comparison, and the fact that the state has, you know, reduced their rates and their premiums are lower, currently lower in the start of 2020 than our premium equivalent rates. But that's partly because they're on a calendar year. They go January to December. We go July through June. So we'll have an opportunity starting in July with next year's budget to address our premium equivalent rates.
I have a question. How many years have we used Brown & Brown as our broker?
Currently, I'm going to say we've had them for the last 2 years, maybe 3.
And then who did we have prior to that?
It was Gallagher Associates. and we had them for, I'm gonna estimate 3 to 5 years.
How often do we look around at like different brokers just to?
Well, as
Compare.
part of our policy, we review our professionals, the professionals and extraordinary service providers on an annual basis, with the stronger consideration that every 3 years we'll put out an RFP unless the board reviews it and determines that it's not necessary, or if in any year within those 3 years, the board wishes to go out for an RFP for those professional services, we will do that.
So was Gallagher, they were costing more than the 55 a year with
They
their
were
services?
comparable.
Okay.
But the district went out for an RFP, received proposals, reviewed them, and, the board came back with a recommendation to retain the services of Brown & Brown.
Okay.
I had one question. If at the end of the year we are lucky enough to be in the black significantly, a couple $100,000 or so, say we end up, what happens to that money? Is it rolled back into the general account? Does it stay in this account and offset next year's?
It's a good question. It depends on the action of the board. So what we have done the last 2 years is in June, we have during budget time, as you're developing next year's budget, you have the ability to budget funds from the prior year as a revenue in the subsequent year. And there's a couple different ways to do that. You can move them through reserve accounts, or you can just do them as a budgeted fund balance, or as part of your surplus or excess surplus. And I hesitate to use that word when referring to it as a revenue for the following year. But in addition to that, in June, when we have a better handle on where we will be with regard to our actual claims, at the year end, the board has the ability to move funds into an emergency reserve account so that from our health benefits, you can move the funds from any of the accounts. It's basically your year-end balance. You can move a certain amount of funds into your emergency reserve, and then those funds could be used in a subsequent budget for either an emergency or for what they have also allowed for emergency and also security-related projects, but also for health benefit increases over 4%. So that's what we have done. So when we've had a balance in our health benefits account or in the other personnel benefits, because you have pensions and there's other line items, if we're going to have a balance in those accounts, we'll move those funds into the emergency reserve so that we can use that to offset anticipated increases in subsequent years. Like the current year, we had a 10% increase, but we funded I'm going to say it's about $680,000 of our $10 million line item from the emergency reserve. Now, this past year in 18-19, by resolution, the board moved in about $584,000 into the emergency reserve account. Now, we anticipated moving more because you're allowed to move in up to 2% of your general fund, and then there's a cap on it. But we wouldn't be at the cap. Our cap is at 2% of the general fund. But because there's some changes in our working capital and what they call the IBNR, it's incurred but not recorded. So on our balance sheet, funds are set aside so that if we ever left being self-insured and went into a private plan or state plan, we would still have claims coming in for a period of time after we moved into a private plan. So then we'd be paying the premiums of a private plan, but we'd still be paying claims that would be coming in. They call that the IBNR. It's been incurred, but it hasn't been recorded. So that's on our balance sheet. And that'll fluctuate year to year. It's based on what our actual claims are. So the auditors will adjust that, and that will affect what the balance is in our health benefit line. So we may, we put in $680,000 thinking that we're going to move that into the emergency reserve for subsequent budgets. They take it to, equalize the IBNR on the balance sheet, and we only had $580,000 left. We'll look at that more closely this year, especially if we can find out information on if our IBNR is going to change. But in addition to that, if we continue to trend, we may have, considerable more than $400,000 or $500,000. if we trend the same as we have for the first 6 months. Now, and if we're in that situation, we may be looking to not move it through an emergency reserve account because that is restricted, but you can utilize budgeted fund balance to move the money into the subsequent year with the purposes of funding that account. The reservation you would have in doing that is that's not a recurring revenue. So depending on, your mindset in using that, and when you use it for health benefits, that's typically a recurring expense that continues to increase. Like when you do it in capital reserve, it's like, hey, we had balances in our maintenance account or our capital reserve. In the subsequent year, we're going to use it for a capital improvement. That's a one-time expense. You don't necessarily need to repeat that in subsequent years. Health benefits, you need to, incur in subsequent years, and you're going to need to fund that. So I'm a little hesitant on, utilizing that strategy out of the gate, but, we'll address that more as we move through the budget. But at this point, I'm hopeful that we're not going to have a significant increase in health benefits, and the broker wants to maintain flat. I'm looking to hopefully cut the line item in health benefits. So, but we'll see how we trend.
Brian, can I ask a couple number questions? So,
Sure.
employee HB, parentheses, $1.8 million. What is that referencing?
Employee, that's the health
1920.
benefit contributions by employees. So that's what used to be Chapter 78.
Okay.
But now it's part of our collective bargaining agreement.
And food service bill?
We charge food service, the enterprise account, for those employees that have health benefits.
And so from 1819 to 1920, the budget jumped $1 million. I just want to understand. Okay. And that's primarily because of premiums or the cost of the insurance?
Well, that was primarily because of what we anticipated the claims were going to come in at.
Gotcha.
Because if you look at those items, they went up. And when the claims go up, certain other expenses that are percentages of those claims also go up.
Right.
But it was mainly in the line item for claims, anticipated claims. Yeah, we went, in 1819, we had, just under 5 million, 4.995 and 4.966. And then in 1920, we budgeted, I believe it was going to be like 5.355 for each of the 6-month periods for claims. So that was the bulk of it. Yeah. And that, the A4 tax is a percentage of claims, so that goes up because we bumped up the claims. So. Nothing else on health benefits? Okay. Wall High School, HVAC facility project updated list. These are a list of projects that are ongoing or recently completed. I'm not sure if there were any questions. I wasn't going to read through them.
I have a couple.
I did have one question.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, sorry, Russell.
You're good.
I was just wondering, Wall Township's a large district, but we're also kind of small in a sense, is that I've noticed that almost all of any of the projects that were done always included an outside vendor. Very few were ever done in-house. And I know that obviously anytime you get any significant thing that needs to be done, you're going to have to bring in a, quote-unquote, true professional. Is there any sense of and I'm looking at this one about the install the a fan, $300 in-house completed. So is there any?
Just if I can, it's in-house / vendor. So even though like this Northeast stage, that was a rigging inspection. That was somebody we hired to do the inspection. We're not going to do that.
Okay, so
And I understand
in-house
you don't-
doesn't mean like having like a custodial trained staff to do the things that need to be done. It's always going to be an outside person.
No, the item number 2, the exhaust fan for the
Yeah.
bathroom, that was done in-house. That was by our maintenance.
Well, that's what I was getting at.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm sorry. That's a maintenance person.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So
But
that-
also, if I can, the third item is in-house as well. We rented a lift, and we purchased lighting from Goodfriend. The next one, the floor mount circulation pump, we did the work. We purchased the pump from Pilot Electric. So maybe that needs to be identified
Well, again, yeah, that would be nice. And again, I'm not like looking to, you know, to nitpick it. My general comments are basically, I was asking you if you knew or had a sense of the amount of items that get done in-house versus what we go out to get bids for. And a lot of these items are well below. They're $500, $800, $1,000 to fix all these little odds and ends that come up on this list every month, as opposed to, you know, having a trained staff, whether that would be worth it to, you know, oh, we don't have a guide. It could be a, you know, a trained guy, a mason or a carpenter that also serves as something else. Is that would be cheaper in the long run to have people on staff to do those kinds of things, instead of going out and hiring a guy or a company every time we need something.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, I know that's kind of a broad question. I'm just trying to get a sense of like what our capabilities of our maintenance staff is, I guess. And how often do we use them to do some of the non-traditional maintenance?
A lot.
Yes.
So out of the 7 here, all of them, with the exception of 2, were done by our in-house staff. So the only one, the first one, Northeast Stage, did the rigging inspection. We're not qualified to do that. We don't maintain that certification. And then for certain things with regard to the boilers, we'll do a lot of regular maintenance, especially on equipment that may be attached to the boilers. But when we get into more involved work with the boilers, we'll bring in Central Boiler, which we have an annual contract with. You know, I can't say compared to many districts, but we are fortunate in a sense with regard to the personnel we do have in our maintenance department. We have a licensed plumber. We have a licensed HVAC. He's a certified technician. We have for years a licensed electrician. I think our current electrician is either will be licensed in the near future. He's going through the process of it. But our first approach is if we can do it in-house, we do. So I would say a majority of our work is done in-house, like probably over 80% of the work. And Mike Monahan, who's the supervisor, is also, I don't know if he's considered licensed, but a very qualified plumber as well as being familiar with boilers and mechanical systems. So.
Brian, can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
So to Joe's point, I think if 2 out of the 7 are out, there's only 1 out of the 7 that say in-house, or 2 out of the 7 say in-house plus material. So if we can get some consistency about in-house/vendor, that would be helpful. Because
Okay.
they don't all
I mean, they all
clarify
say-
that. They don't all clarify that.
Well, the 4 of them say in-house. The one that doesn't says is Pilot Electric.
Nonetheless,
that
it's not
should say-
consistent, that's all. The quote for the Northeast Stage, it was completed on the 4th. Do we not pay until the inspection's done? How does that work? That's only a quote instead of a final price. So curious to know about that.
Oh, no, it would be a quote that, you know, that should be the final price, is based on the quote. So what we'll do is, when we say it's a quote from multiple providers. So we obtain a quote from more than one company to perform the inspection.
So we don't know what the project cost is actually yet.
No, it should be $1,999 to come out and perform
But that's
the
not
inspection.
what, but that's not what we plan on paying yet, because we don't know, because it's still based on a quote is what I'm getting at. I mean, there's something that could happen between now and then that could potentially change that quote, yes or no?
The answer should be no, because they're
Should be,
doing a
but-
quote for performing an inspection. They're not doing work, they're not making any repairs.
Got it.
They're performing the inspection, so
Gotcha. Thank
their
you.
bill should be their quote.
Well, gotcha. The lift rental. It was a $3,100 project, of which almost $1,400 was for the lift rental. How much does a lift cost to buy for the district that we don't have to rent one for $1,400 for a $3,000 project?
A lot, and it really becomes to the use of it. This is a lift that,
It's not a
an
scissor
exterior lift. It's a lull-type lift with the exterior wheels that you can drive around. This was for the site lighting in the parking lots.
Oh, it's that high.
Yes.
Gotcha. Oh, I'm thinking of interior scissor light.
No.
Scissor lift. Gotcha.
We have a interior scissor lift for like going through 3-foot doors.
Gotcha. The West Belmar added heat to room 9. Were all the inhabitants of that room for the last 50 years like frozen to death? Like, is that new heat, or what's the story with that? I don't understand. Like, we added heat. Is that just like
I
fix
think
the
they
heat,
supplemented heat.
or okay? Just struck
make
me
them
as
warm.
odd. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the room.
Yeah, so we did a tour of the building today, Chris and I, and I believe that's the upstairs, it's an upstairs like office room.
It's, so in the old entrance
Yeah.
to West Belmar, where you used to come in, they use it for, I think, some type of study skills, and there's a little office
Yeah.
area. And there was like, sort of like where you would come through, there was a heating unit, and then there was a room that was off to the side of it, which,
Never
for
had
lack
heat.
of a better term, would
Never
have
had
been
heat,
like
they
where
said.
you walk through and you might have like said hello to somebody as you came in. It was a tiny little room like this, and what they did, and I think it was Mike who did it,
Yeah.
and that's just to piggyback on your question, Joe, going through, I would definitely recommend, because they spoke to a lot of the things that get done in-house, and, you know, how talented a lot of those folks are. They took basically I'm not a heating guy, but it was, I guess, an exhaust, and they just like shot it off the heating system and then put it into the other room. It's like a vent that they had it was heating the room next to it, and then they stole a little heat from it and added a register. Very good. That's it. Perfect.
There's the window.
But also similar to that, at Allenwood School today, one of the boilers is down, and they're doing it in-house. They're getting the parts, and I think it's, I don't know, less than $2,000 in parts, maybe, for it. I think that's what it is. And they were talking to us about how they've gone in on Sundays. There was an issue with something where they had to cap lines and do all kinds of things, and all things they were able to do in-house, which saved considerable amount of money. So we do have some pretty talented people. And the unfortunate thing is, you know, I brought this up over the years, you know, there are some other projects where these individuals are talented enough to do them. There's just not enough hours in the day with everything else they have to do to be able to complete them. So that's why sometimes we have to go outside to other contractors.
I just wanted to bring something up. I had mentioned it in the past before in regards to Allenwood, and I know we had done the paving. The county had did the paving right outside, but there is a huge parking issue with lack of parking for parents. And, you know, I've just noticed at pickup that, you know, there's little kids crossing the street and like running, and the bad weather, and, you know, cars are flying down that road, and the crossing guard is obviously on the other side, you know, so there's really no guidance. And it just, you know, it doesn't sit well with me knowing, you know, I'd feel so much better if we were able to see a crosswalk with like a sign, you know, telling cars you have to stop if you see a person on the street right there. Like, how can we make that happen? Can we reach out to the county? It's just, it doesn't sit well with me.
Are you talking about adding a crosswalk? Because there's one at the far
Yes,
end, but a
but for
majority of the people go to
parents,
the front end and
yes.
violate the crosswalk rule. Is that what you're referring
Well,
to?
because the buses are all lined up over there, so parents are not walking with students who are being dismissed out that side. So the pickup door is on the opposite end, so you're not gonna walk through kids and busing and all over there. To come out, you know, we have
don't
like
think-
senior citizens, you
No,
know,
I don't,
picking up
I could
kids.
drive, I
It's
live right
just-
there, so I understand what you're saying. I drive by there a lot. I don't think we determine whether the crosswalk can be where we want it to be, do we?
No, we can make a request, but
Yeah.
that's by the municipality.
I really feel strongly about it. It's just,
To,
It's a county
County road.
Chair,
yeah, it's just dangerous.
Chair, is that a county or a local road?
It's a county road.
Oh, okay, so there'll be some other steps with that. But just an observation where you have a street that's, you know, extra dangerous, or concern rather, better word. I noticed that Neptune High School, they literally have the signage and the crossing visuals to help, but they also have 2 crossing guards, so there's one on either side of the street. I don't know, because I'm not familiar, but if that's a possibility too.
I think,
And they work in conjunction with each other. Anytime you're on Taylor Avenue, you can see it in operation.
Police car there.
well,
And there's always police guard, but
well,
these,
no, not,
these individuals, and these individuals are actually, they're speaking directly to Erin's concern. about supporting the children going through. That's what I was making the suggestion.
Part of what Aaron's speaking to is on days when I think there's a lot of special events at Allenwood School, when there's more parents. Because typically, I mean, every now and then you will find some people parking on the other street now, and they walk out. What she's talking about is when they're leaving, they're walking out the exit driveway because there's no sidewalks over there. There's nothing. So they're actually walking down the exit driveway where the buses come out and then crossing the street there. And you know, maybe you get 1 or 2 cars over there a day, and on days when there's a lot of some kind of activity in the school, you know, you might have 15 cars over there and kids running across the street, as she's saying. So I don't know. I know the crossing guards at the other street for the kids that live in the neighborhood. I don't know if that's something maybe Wall Police could be alerted to when there's a special event where they could go over there, and because they do park cars over there sometimes, but it's not every time.
Pickup has been, it's a lot more now. I would say there's at least 10 cars on across the street now. So it's not, you know, the parking, there's not a lot of parent parking for pickup and that door, so the kids are running across the street, like, and then the buses are leaving out that way. It's so congested, and then the traffic on that street, the drivers just drive so fast. So, I don't know.
Mr. Chair, maybe in addition to the request, but my frame of reference is there was a traffic division person. I don't know if we have that in Wall or if it's under, right? So have that, maybe that person could go out and examine that for us.
And they work with the county engineers.
Is the dismissal plan for Allenwood such that everybody leaves at the same time? Because I know in some schools, the bus kids go and then the pickup walkers or whatever go afterwards. What's the plan at
All of
Allenwood?
the schools have a staggered dismissal, but, you know, you can see it can only be so staggered. And
Understood.
if parents are picking up their children or if parents are there for a special event and then leaving with their children, but we'll follow up on those things.
Can I just ask a quick question on this actual form itself? What determines whether or not we get this? Is there like a formula? Because I know this doesn't do the Department of Justice. I know they do much more stuff.
Yeah.
What determines whether or not we're getting a report here?
Director of Facilities, what they identify, I mean, I've reviewed it with them. I mean, the other thing we're working on, which goes back to what the request was in the past, to get a listing on how many workers are being entered, how many are being completed, how many are, so we're still working on that to be, like, as a part of a global report. So this is going to evolve. You know, Mr. Moretta's still getting his feet wet, getting familiar with the buildings, but this is an area that we've discussed making more informational for the purposes of the board.
Brian, what's the work order software that you use?
School Dude.
And they don't have a standard report that can be broader than what we see here that looks like it's in a Word format?
They do. It's Mr. Moretta going through and weeding out which work orders are complete, should be removed, and be identified as being on the list, but it's not, and we can discuss what that report would look like as far as identifying all the work orders in detail, just more of global, you know, how many being entered, how many are being reviewed. I mean, he's going back through and reviewing work orders that may be dated, and whether they should be, you know, refreshed and actually completed, or should be taken off the list or canceled.
Can we call our school dude to help us facilitate some type of presentation to the board dudes here?
We did speak about this at the WTA Health and Safety meetings, in trying to figure out, because I mean it's a transition anytime you take over an operation. You're never, there's no start and no finish. It's always a cycle. So one of the things that we talked about was what was the best way to just establish a baseline so that you have some means of being able to come up with a accurate way of reporting the data back.
Well-
So that was something that he was,
Yeah, but isn't this a state system
no.
No,
that you're in? This is our own system. And
proprietary.
there's like 7 or 8 different categories that keep changing with projects.
Well, this is,
That's the last time we got a briefing, and that's what we were told. It could be delayed, it could be this, it could be that, and
Oh, the
it's,
status
that's
of
the
a work
status,
order.
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, that's the way, I mean, I use it every day, so I can,
Yeah, it's not easy,
no, it's not, and
and
if
it's not simple
you get
to
behind,
understand,
or you're
right?
not getting people closing it out, you know, it requires a standard operating procedure for somebody to, manage it, so that I think, that was something that we were talking about as a group, so I can sympathize a little bit with Mr. Moretta trying to just figure out where a snapshot in time is right now so that he can start looking forward. So from talking to him yesterday when we were walking around, he's getting his feet under him, but it takes a little bit of time.
Well, it's not our role to facilitate Mr. Moretta's work. Is it possible to make a recommendation for consideration that professional development focus of his is to devise a report that this board can be comfortable with out of the School Dude software going forward, that we're comfortable with, modeled off of some other school boards' use, or the software helping us figure that out?
Yeah, that's already in place. The
Okay.
matter is like, what's the deadline for that? I mean.
I would like at the beginning of the next fiscal year, from my opinion, but that's just my
Ah.
2 cents.
Well, yeah, I think,
Oh, I thought you were gonna say like next week. I mean, the
Well,
goal
it'd be
is to
great,
have it
but if you can,
absolutely in place prior to
low
the start of
low
next
bar,
school year
easy
in July.
success. Let's shoot that way.
well, I mean, bottom
Mr.
line
Chair?
is, he can,
Yes.
I want to caution, because I did say this once before, in terms of, us getting directly involved in the management of the school. And I mean, I just right now pulled up images of what School Dude's site looks like. I know Adam and I know Aaron and myself have all had to use this system. So if I could just, Russell, if you don't mind, clarify that, maybe just give us a presentation on how it works and looks, because then it is up to the individual custodial heads and the management, their supervisors, of which we have a new one, and we did say we were going to give him this time. And also we did say with the teachers union that we wanted them to help with that fleshing out. But I do think, given the things that we've had to deal with in the past, it's very impressive. It's not, it's very helpful in terms of managing and tracking, at least from my experience, the work that does go on in the district. And it's not just it's typically not for big projects. So the big project stuff still will come this way. That is, what I was told by my BA. But anyway, this other part of it is very critical, because the great work that we've all been talking about that a custodial maintenance does do in the buildings and goes beyond in terms of keeping the facilities where they are, but we want better, we know that.
And just touching on that, my understanding from the conversations we've had, there's different capabilities of the program itself, where somebody might have like maybe a full program, and maybe somebody might have a scaled back program. So I guess the real question is, the particular version we have, does it have the ability to do the things like Russell was talking about, generating reports like that, or is that something of an add-on that we have to get?
Yeah, I think with regard to, the capabilities, it's the permissions that you're giving users on the account. So as the facilities director, you're going to have carte blanche. You're going to be able to do anything you want. And then it's a matter of, like, a custodial supervisor at a particular building is only going to be given permissions perhaps for the work orders in their building only. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the restrictions on permissions. With regard to the capabilities of School Dude, with regard to the maintenance module, we have the capabilities that are offered. Because there's a number of other modules that you can have also for performing work.
Okay, thank you.
Just to build off the capability, we can, I'm confident, run a report right now that's gonna give you everything you want. It's probably gonna be about 4,000 pages long. So it's being able.
That's not what I want, but I
Yeah,
understand.
that's what, so that's why
And
we're
then
trying
trying to be able to explain it.
Yeah, trying to get it so that you can classify and sort through that data. I mean, garbage in, garbage out. That's, you know, how it works. So if he needs some time to be able to, for instance, close out older ones. There may be stuff that's already done that's open. That was one thing that I know we had spoken about. And then to build off of Ralph's point, making sure that the external users have the capability to see and there to be a back and forth communication as to, okay, say I put a work order in, okay, it's now being worked on, or it's been assigned to this person, now it's been worked on, now it's complete, and there's some notes in it saying what was done, and then closing it out. So there's like a 5 or 6 step process to change those statuses that you brought up, and somebody actually has to manually go through and do all that, and if you haven't been consistent with it, it is a nightmare to get back up to speed.
Just for the record, I certainly don't want 4,000 pages, and if I misled anybody in what I'm looking for, then I apologize. I too have experience with School Dude as a school employee who has put in the requests, but also on a finance committee of an independent school that's gotten reports from School Dude, so I know its capabilities. I know we pay good money for it. I know there's software support. My ambition is July 1st, let's get a good clean start with a new fiscal year. We've had some School Dude, challenges in the past with, we've had a big trailer challenge around here. So how do we pursue better reporting from the software that we're paying good money for? That's my ambition. This is a committee meeting. This is not the full board meeting as it stands. This is where that work should be discussed. That's all I'm asking for.
Anything else on that? Okay, item number 7, HVAC improvements at district schools, Phase 2. You have the attachment of the bid tabulation, the recommendation from the engineer. This will be an agenda item for next week. With regard to, as a comparison to the budget included $2,747,000 in the budget. When originally developed, we did not include the 3 classrooms at Old Mill School that needed to be included in this project because they were omitted from the first project because they had cassette type air conditioning. They didn't have the unit vents. So as part of Phase 2, we were going to change those rooms over as unit ventilator air conditioning as opposed to the cassette type in the ceiling.
So, question on that. Those are, when you're talking about that, those are those white units that come out of the wall.
Yes, they either
Okay.
out of the wall or in the ceiling.
So, the rooms we were in today at Old Mill, we were told that they were brand new installed last year because they didn't do the new system and they installed these new air conditioners that are brand new and working fine.
One of them was air conditioned, the other 2 were not air conditioned, but they weren't included in the project for the univent. So we put the cassette type in over the summer.
Right. So it's the opinion from what we heard today, me and Chris, certainly, that they work great and they wouldn't suggest moving those and taking them out and doing these other ones because I think the cost works out to, doesn't it work out to be about $13,000 a setup per classroom, somewhere in that neighborhood?
For a new unit ventilator?
Right.
At least.
Yeah, right. So because you have to do all the shelving and everything else. So looking at it today and
Well, you don't have to do the shelving, but we tend to
but we
include
do,
that in the
right.
project.
My suggestion would be, based on the feedback I received from them, would be that we leave those air conditioners in there because they're 10 years plus we can get out of them. Everybody's very happy with them, and then use that money to do other spaces that aren't air conditioned. You know, since they just put them in last year, it doesn't make sense to rip out something that's brand new.
Well, the plan would not be to remove them and discard them. They would be removed and maintained, and they would be used elsewhere in the district. Because we typically use them for office spaces or wherever we may need to air condition a space that isn't air conditioned, especially if it's due to a student's IEP.
Right, but we already paid right, to.
Well, we did that in-house. That was done in-house, but we paid for the equipment.
Right,
and
so,
the difference is, they don't provide by themselves the ventilation requirements that we need for the classroom space. So essentially what you need to do to operate that classroom in compliance with code is you have a univentilator that'll be against the wall, or another heating and ventilation unit. For those rooms, I believe it would be the univentilator against the wall that provides the fresh air requirement that we have for that classroom. The cassette-type Sanyo units that are on the wall do not provide the fresh air component. They just air condition the space. So you need to run the univentilator to provide the ventilation. So if it's in the summer, you're blowing in hot air or warm air, and then you're cooling it with the Sanyo unit. So it is not a very efficient manner in which to operate. And if someone goes along and shuts the univentilator off because it's blowing in hot air, then you're not meeting the code requirement of fresh air.
But cut to the chase, what does our engineer say that we're paying?
To change them out and
With
put in the
this.
univentilator.
Right, okay.
Just to address your concern. We were in Old Mill, and Brian is right, and this has been a challenge for a lot of school districts in that a lot of IEPs now require air conditioning, and air conditioning to do it right, as we're doing here and now, it's expensive. So in order to get a stopgap in there, you either throw a window unit in or some other way of complying with the IEP, and then when you have it budgeted, designed, engineered, I mean, it all takes time, then you do it right. So it's unfortunately repetitive, and sometimes you have to do it twice, but this is what we have to do to comply with the code. We don't have a choice.
Plus it gets connected, the newer
it's heat
system
too.
gets connected to the building management system. It, gets put on the schedule, it goes into occupancy